Welcome to the Bible's most quoted verses. I'm your host, Gary Palmer. Today, we're diving into one of the Bible's most cherished yet often misunderstood passages. Let's dive in. You've probably seen it everywhere, right? Printed on bumper stickers, held up on neon signs at football games, and painted on massive billboards all over the world. John 3:16 is, without a doubt, the most recognized and memorized verse in the entire Bible. But today, we're going to look closely at our sources to understand the actual mechanics of this text. What have renowned theologians said about it, and why does it form the very foundation of the Christian faith? Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack exactly how this single sentence operates as so much more than just a cultural cliche. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive right in by looking at how the late evangelist Billy Graham famously described this single sentence. He called it a miniature Bible. Now, that is a massive claim, but what he meant was, if you were to somehow lose every other page of the biblical text, this one verse serves as a flawless, totally complete summary of the gospel message. It literally packs the problem, the solution, the cost, and the promise into roughly 25 words. It's an absolute masterclass in brevity. But to really grasp why it's structured this way, we have to rewind just a bit to understand the context surrounding it. So, to truly understand the verse, our sources suggest looking at the actual narrative context, which is Jesus' secretive nighttime conversation with a religious leader named Nicodemus. And the central theme here? Well, it's humanity's desperate need for a complete spiritual restart. When Nicodemus tries to figure out how a person can be right with God, Jesus introduces this radical concept of needing to be born again. This exchange establishes the entire theological premise that sets up John 3:16, the core idea that humanity requires a rescue mission it simply cannot provide for itself. Pastor Gary Hamrick brilliantly contrasts these two types of birth to help us wrap our heads around the concept. Think about your physical birth for a second. That was entirely the decision of others, right? You had absolutely zero say in when, where, or to whom you were born. But spiritual birth, that is framed as something completely different. According to Hamrick, it requires a deliberate, conscious, and highly personal choice. You can't inherit it from your parents, and you can't just passively absorb it from the culture around you. It demands an active, intentional decision on your part. This builds right into a profound reality highlighted by the Bible Project regarding the verse's opening phrase, "For God so loved the world." They emphasize that in this ancient context, God's love isn't just some warm, fuzzy feeling or a passive sentiment. No, it is a sacrificial rescue mission. You see, the word "so" in this text actually implies "in this way," meaning God loved the world in this specific way, by taking definitive action, rather than just feeling love from a safe distance. The theology argues that he demonstrated it by stepping directly into the mess of human history. Now, what's really fascinating here is how theologian David Guzzik breaks down the structure of this verse into what he calls the 7 wonders. It clearly maps out the precise mechanics of this act of love. It's like a perfectly constructed logical progression of thought. It starts with the almighty authority, for God. Then it moves to the mightiest motive, so loved, the widest welcome, the world, the greatest gift, that he gave his only begotten Son, the easiest escape, that whoever believes in him, the divine deliverance, should not perish, and finally, the priceless possession, but have everlasting life. It covers the whole shebang. The famous 19th century preacher Charles Spurgeon was deeply struck by the specific language used here. He noted its sublime simplicity, pointing out that the verse is mostly made up of simple monosyllables, short, punchy words. Yet within those simple, easy-to-read words, theologians find the deepest, most complex truths, namely, the substitutionary nature of Jesus taking on human flesh to become a redeemer for the guilty. It's this beautiful paradox, a text simple enough for a child to grasp, yet so incredibly layered that scholars literally spend lifetimes studying its implications. But wait, to truly grasp the sheer weight of this incredible gift, our sources point us to the high stakes of humanity's fall. I mean, why was a rescue mission even necessary in the first place? What exactly are we being rescued from? Well, the text states that the gift was given so that humanity would not perish. According to biblical theology, humanity rebelled against the Creator, and because God is perfectly just, that rebellion carries a very real penalty. Escaping this righteous judgment is the central crisis that this entire verse is designed to address. Let's look closer at that word perish. In this context, it signifies far, far more than just fading out of existence or dying a natural physical death. As our sources explain, to perish means eternal separation from God and facing a just, deserved wrath for sin. It's an undeniably heavy concept for sure, but it is absolutely essential to understanding the theology at play here. Jesus is viewed as the substitute who is sent to stand in the place of the guilty and absorb that justice, specifically so that humanity wouldn't have to face it. So, the absolutely crucial point becomes, how do we actually escape this judgment? The verse states that it happens for whoever believes in him, but our sources argue that this hinges entirely on understanding a heavily misunderstood word. In modern language, believe often just means acknowledging that a fact is true. Like, sure, I believe the sky is blue. But the biblical concept of belief, that operates on a vastly different level. Theologian John MacArthur clarifies this brilliantly. He points out that true saving faith isn't just mental assent. It's not just knowing the historical facts. After all, as our sources point out, even the devil knows who Jesus is. Instead, true belief is defined as a life-altering trust and an active dependence on Jesus as Lord. Within this framework, a person recognizes their own hopeless condition and actively trusts Christ as their only substitute. It's a complete 180-degree transfer of trust from your own abilities to him. And this illustrates a phenomenal point Dilly Graham made about the word whoever or whosoever. It is a total game changer because it literally removes all earthly barriers. It doesn't matter your race, your language, your socioeconomic background, or the sum total of your past mistakes. The path of salvation is presented as accessible to absolutely everyone. There's no exclusive VIP list for eternal life here. The invitation is framed as being as wide and as welcoming as humanity itself. That life-altering trust leads us directly to the ultimate promise of this verse: eternal life. In this theology, by placing your dependence entirely on Christ, that terrifying fear of judgment and perishing, it is completely replaced with absolute eternal security. Jesus' death is seen as paying the penalty, and his resurrection guarantees a new life. It is framed as the ultimate exchange. But actually, there is a very common misconception about eternal life that our sources are eager to address. This brings up a really fascinating question for us to ponder as we go through this explainer. When exactly does this promised eternal life begin? If you were to stop someone on the street and ask them, most people would probably say that eternal life begins after you die, right? That it refers solely to heaven and the afterlife. But a closer look at the theology behind John 3:16 reveals a very different and frankly much more immediate timeline. As Billy Graham often preached, life doesn't begin when you die. It begins here and now. Wow, think about that. According to this interpretation, eternal life isn't just delayed until your physical body gives out. Rather, it begins the exact millisecond a person puts their active trust in Jesus. It results in a present-day reality of peace, forgiveness, and a completely restored relationship with the Creator today. The security of God's love becomes a present reality the moment you believe. Ultimately, our sources make it clear that the message of John 3:16 presents every single human being with a definitive crossroads. Two paths, one leading to eternal separation from a perfectly just God, and the other offering the completely free gift of eternal life through active trust. Whether you view it as a deeply personal invitation or the foundational cornerstone of a massive global faith, this miniature Bible continues to force a response from millions around the world. So as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this thought. What will you do today with the life-changing truth of this miniature Bible? Thank you so much for exploring these incredible sources with me, and definitely keep digging into the history and impact of these profound ideas.